of his personality when he gets going.
And I sat down and I wrote this novel that I thought was captivating, and I thought it was stunning, and I absolutely knew this sucker was 800 pages long. 800 pages. And I love dialogue. If you read the novels, I love getting the dialogue right. I wanted every character, when they see another character, to be like when we see each other. So one character would see another, and he would say, "Hey, how you doing?" "Pretty good. What's going on?" "Nothing. What's going on with you?" "Nothing." Every character, when they saw another character, "Hey, how you doing?" "Pretty good. What's going on?" "Nothing. What's going on with you?" "Nothing." I mean, my wife took, I'm not joking, 300 of my 800 pages, 300 pages, and threw them in the garbage. My next novel could be called "Hey, How You Doing" by Brad Meltzer, right? It was a disaster. But I now had this 500-page lean, mean writing machine. It was awesome. I loved it. Best book of all time. And I submit the book. I said, "What do I do now?" I finished my book. They said, "Well, you got to go get an agent. You must have an agent. If you want to sell your book, you got to get an agent." So I was living in Boston at the time. They gave me all these hotshot New York agents. And I said, "Give me an agent in Boston. I'm living in Boston." They gave me one Boston agent. And I call up all the New York agents, and I say to them, "Listen, everybody's calling me. You're going to love this. Everyone loves my book. They all want to buy it." Nobody was calling me. Okay, I was just a big fat liar. And they knew it, because if everyone was calling me, why am I calling them? And the one agent in Boston calls me up, and she says, "I like your book." The person I bother the least calls me up and says, "I like your writing. I want to represent your book, Brad." I said, "Fantastic. What do I do now?" She said, "Well, if you want to be the nice guy, if you want to do the nice thing, you should call the other agents and tell them, 'Listen, don't go and read my novel. I'm going to go with this agent in Boston.'" My mom raised me right. God bless her. She, I hope, taught me to be a nice person. I said, "Okay." I called the New York agents. I said, "Listen, don't waste your time reading my book. I have an agent in Boston now, but thank you for considering my novel." And this is a true story. This one agent in New York, she says to me, "Brad," and every New York agent, by the way, starts every sentence with that. She says, "Brad, that's not how books get sold. They don't get sold in Boston. You want to know how they get sold?" And I'm like, "Yeah." She goes, "Here's how they get sold. They don't get sold in Boston, they get sold in New York, and here's how they get sold. I'm sitting at a cocktail party, I'm having a good time, and I see this editor, and he's really good looking, so I take him home with me and we sleep together. And the next day we wake up naked next to each other, and he turns to me and he says, 'So, what do you got?' And that's how books get sold." And I'm on the line, I'm like, "Can you send my manuscript back, please?" But I realized in that moment, and I moved past the sexually charged agent, who, the best part of the whole thing, this is true, she's one of the biggest agents in the country right now. Like, I see all these deals she's making, I'm like, this is that nut job that says that she sleeps with people. I'm like, I love that. I love that she's like, it's worked for her. She's working it still. God bless America, right? It's just perfect. That's like 50 Shades of Grey you guys are reading, I can tell right now. So I moved past that, and we send the book out. It's my first novel. It's not the 10th Justice, my first novel I ever write. And I quickly get, this is true, 24 rejection letters. To be clear, there were only 20 publishers at the time. I got 24 rejection letters. That means some people are writing you twice to make sure you get the point. Okay? But I said, you know what? If they don't like that book, I'm going to write another. And if they don't like that book, I'm going to write another. I was young, and I was stubborn, and I didn't care, and I loved it. I loved every day falling in love with these imaginary people. That's my job is, right? I talk to imaginary people all day long. And that's what I did. I said, you know what, if they don't like that, I'm going to write another one. And the week after I got my 23rd and 24th rejection letter was the week I started what became the 10th Justice, my first published novel. And so the book, I finished the 10th Justice, and I had a plot that I really liked, and I wrote the book, and we sent it out. And I'll be the first to say, I got lucky, right? When you write a novel and you send it out, all it takes, they told me, is one person to say yes. You get one person to say yes, and that's the answer. I got one person. And so the publisher took it over, and he published the book, and I said, okay, we made edits, we made the changes, we got the cover, we picked all the stuff, and we got the author photo. You got to go look, by the way, I just found my original author photo. It is fantastic. Like, I didn't have a head of hair, I had a mane of hair. Like, it's spectacular, and you should see it. I just put it on my website on Facebook, and people were like, who is that, Teddy Roosevelt? Like, what is that person? I saw a couple people had 10th Justice here. If you do, share it with the person next to you. You'll say you love them, and you'll give them a laugh if you see my first author photo. Well, we pick out the photo, and I say to my publisher, how do we sell the book, though? How do we sell it? And he said to me, if you want to sell a movie, you put, Brad Pitt or George Clooney in the preview, you make a big preview, and if people like Brad Pitt and George Clooney, they go see the movie. They said, books are very different, though. And I want you to think of the last good book you read right now. Think of the last book you read. And it's usually because someone said to you, you got to read this book, right? And it may be a friend, it may be a columnist who said it to you, it may be Oprah, it may be a librarian or a bookstore worker, someone working in a bookstore, an employee there. But someone's saying to you, you gotta read this book. So they said, if you want your books to sell, books are sold by word of mouth. So if you want yours to sell, Brad, one of two things has to be true. Either one, you know a lot of people. Or two, you know a couple people with really big mouths. Okay? Now let me tell you about my family. Okay? This has been a really crazy past couple of years for me. In the past 4 years, I lost my mother and my father. Both of them. And it's been a devastating time. But I will tell you that I love talking about them because they were insane, right? They were the greatest. My mother used to go into every Barnes & Noble in, Aventura, Florida, and she'd be like, yes, I'm here for my author, my favorite author of all time, his new book, Brad Meltzer. He's my favorite author. Do you have his new book? And they're like, Mrs. Meltzer, we know he's your son. We know he's your son. And she'd be like, what do you mean John Grisham's in the front window? Not anymore. Now Meltzer's in the front window. And I'm like, Mom, you can't do that. That's not even fair. You can't do that to other authors. And my dad, this is a true story. My dad, a couple years before he died, had hip replacement surgery. This is about 10 years ago. And my dad, when he was 18 years old, he died on the table. He flatlined on the table as an 18-year-old. And they brought him back to life. Unbelievable. And so here he was in his 60s. He thought, like, I'm never going to survive this. I don't have the body of an 18-year-old anymore. I died the last time I had surgery. So he's terrified that these are his last moments on the earth. And so he's so nervous that they can't calm. His blood pressure is raging so hard. They can't even give him they have to give him tranquilizers to give him the anesthetic because he's so out of control. So they fill him full of anesthetic. They fill him full of tranquilizers. Then they take him upstairs. They give him now all the anesthetic and everything else they give him. He goes, he's in surgery for an hour. An hour goes to an hour and a half. We're in the waiting room like, please, God, let him be okay. And finally, after 2 hours, the doctor comes down, and he says to me, you want to go up there and see him? I say, of course I want to go up there and see him. And so I go upstairs. My dad is filled with drugs, has no idea what's going on, and he blinks his eyes awake at me. It's a true story. And he looks at me and he says, I love you. And he says to me, I sold 12 books up there. And I said, that's what you're thinking of when you're this close to death? I said, that's what you're thinking of? And I said to him, did you tell him about the paperbacks? So, but my editor said...
That's just